Excellent. Well, I see our attendees are filing on in here, so thank you so much for being here today. Let's just get started. Today, we're going to be talking about not just Active Directory, but the best practices around it, and also on top of that, how you could be enabling these best practices today. So we are very fortunate to be joined with our special guest speaker. We have Kyle Gililland over here. He's joining us from Trace3. He has a JD, CISSP, CISM, CIPP, and as mentioned, he is the practice director, governance, risk, and compliance over at Trace3. A couple of the other voices you're going to hear on this call, we have Garrett Graychuk. He is the CEO of UAttest, as well as Cher Azam. He's the product manager, and then myself, Austin, who is also with UAttest. Now that we covered the introductions, this is what we're going to be doing today. We're going to first jump off and talk about the regulations. What's driving this, need to actually have these best practices? Then Kyle's going to do a great job explaining the view from the field, what's currently happening out there right now. Next, Cher is going to talk about UAttest and Active Directory, where we'll lead into a short demo, just going over UAttest, talking about how you could meet some of these best practices. And please hold on to your questions. You could definitely write them in as we go along, because we will be having a Q&A where Kyle, Cher, Garrett, myself, we will all be answering your questions. So hope you have a good time. With that being said, I'm going to pass it on over to Garrett, and he's going to talk about the regulations a little bit.
Fantastic, Austin. Great start. And Kyle, thanks for being on this webinar. This is going to be huge. I appreciate it. Let's take it away. Okay, little story about compliance and regulation. When I started the two-factor company 15 years ago, wow, I looked at the market and people doing under compliance and regulations in the IT space. Seriously, most of the ones that I would talk to, the security managers, about 25, give me a number, 25 to 40% of them basically said they were under some kind of compliance. Today, that number is closer to 80%. If you're doing business and you're buying public software, and I mean that, if you're not just a freeware shop, you're under some compliance. So I don't have to tell you this, but I'll mention a few of them that matters. And we're doing most of our compliance work. HIPAA high trust, just healthcare isn't saying with the regulations, because you in the healthcare know that you're not just following HIPAA and high trust. You're often following SOX if you're public. You're often following SOC 2 Type 2 if you have some cloud resources, and you might be under even some of the other ones. Okay, so HIPAA high trust for healthcare. SOC 2 Type 2 is the types of audits we'll be talking today, is always discussed in our cloud companies. SOX 404B for the publicly traded. ISO 27001, many of our shops, and the solution we're talking about today is international. And I was just doing some calls with our friends over in Germany, and they were big followers of 27001. And of course, in the financial industry, not the financials, that's N2A, FFIC, that's not on there, but in the retail, PCI DSS still is mandated. And all of these requirements, all of these governances and guidances have bullet points about access reviews, which we will be putting front and center on this prezo today. Next. But let me, before I hand over to Kyle and talk about his best practices, most of the shops we talk to, the security directors are fully aware of NIST SP 853 revision 5 now. And there's two key ones I like to talk about when it comes to identity governance. The first is PRAC-4, which spells out directly that it's best practices to be running access reviews. And that's what Austin in the demo will be showing. But there's one more before I hand it off. Principle of least privilege. Principle of least privilege. That's why we are being hacked. And Kyle's unique when he talks, because not only does his JD and all this, also has a pretty good mind when it comes to attacks. Okay? And me as a pure identity guy, I look at the attacks and I always think, all right, so they got a hold of that account, right? Should the person who that account is, should it have had all those privileges? And that's where we're focused here on UTS. Watch the product and what was going, is making sure that the actual identity, the identity that is granted and the access given that identity is actually the right privileges, or if it doesn't have too many. And that's why NIST spells out access reviews. And that's why HIPAA High Trust spells out access reviews. And I can go down the list. It is not just to do, compliance, but it's actually to make sure that the accounts that we have granted don't have too much privileges, because either the person himself can cause damage in insider attacks, or if that account gets compromised, it can do damage. So as we talk, just think of those two concepts. Take it away.
Excellent. Hey, thank you so much for setting the table there. That was a really good start. So we're going to pass it on over to Kyle, someone who's in the trenches, who has a really good understanding of what's actually happening in the field. So thank you for joining us, Kyle, and you're free to go.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. Thanks, Garrett and Austin, for the intro. All good stuff. I think, I've been working in compliance and kind of helping regulated industries build and manage security and compliance programs for a long time. And despite the kind of continued alphabet soup of compliance and regulatory requirements in the area of really account management, we continue to see gaps. In my role as practice director of GRC here at Trace3, we work with a lot of clients around the country in various verticals, assessing their security programs just in general, and also as compared to or pegged against some of these compliance frameworks and regulatory requirements. And like I said, what we're seeing is that despite the requirement, and it's certainly not a new requirement to understand your identities and perform routine user account review, we still see a lot of gaps. And what does that really look like? What are we seeing? Number one is that Active Directory, is still used. Obviously, I think most folks who are, probably on this call are like myself. We come from Windows shops. We leverage Windows workstations. Windows Active Directory is kind of the linchpin of our identity framework. And despite that, right, Active Directory tends to be a mess. What do I mean by that? We've got, everything from stale accounts, right? Or, somebody leaves, well, gosh, their account isn't disabled, or the folks out there are, have all these accounts over, that they've amassed for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years since, Windows NT and their first Windows 2000 migration, and all of a sudden, they're going, gosh, this mountain is too big to climb. I can't do a review because we just have never done it. Service accounts, things that while Garrett says that we should have least privilege, and absolutely we should. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that a lot of service accounts are being granted, full domain administrative rights. They aren't adequately mapped to a particular service or function. So people don't really know what they're there for. They just created that service account back in 2012 and set it and forgot it, right? The passwords to those have been unchanged because, gosh, how can you change a password if you don't know where it's used, where the actual authentication is occurring? And similarly, privileged accounts, like actual admin accounts for users, IT staff, they aren't monitored. They aren't being reviewed. They don't know if people who've been assigned, those administrative privileges still need them. They aren't really getting fine-grained. So that's a real issue. Similarly, what we're seeing is that while AD is probably the core of our identity, framework, authentication is kind of disparate, right? And that problem continues to grow, actually, right? Despite living in a world where, federated access is a real thing that can be accomplished, we're seeing that as companies kind of move towards SaaS applications, sometimes that SaaS migration is happening outside of IT control. kind of the shadow IT space, where all of a sudden you've got authentication occurring in 12 different applications outside of the business. So what does that mean? It means that the kind of the keys to the kingdom aren't just within the kingdom anymore, right? They're living outside of your four walls. And those accounts out there in those SaaS applications are not being monitored. And then last but not least, coming from kind of an IT operations background, this has always been a thorn in my side. Somebody says, hey, your IT, go review all the access. Well, gosh, I'm the custodian of my authentication platform, but at the same time, I don't know who these users are. I don't know what their role in the organization, I don't know what access they should have. So you're asking me to do a review. Well, guess what? It's just going to go, I'm just going to do a rubber stamp review because that's the best I can do. I'm guessing as to what access should be there. And so instead of passing that buck down to the line of business owner, the managers, the people who maybe own the relationship with respect to the vendors who have access to the platform, those types of reviews should be done by those line of business leaders. But unfortunately, that's not being done. And as a result, we've misplaced that responsibility, and it's either not being done, or when it is done, it's not really adequate. So we're missing the mark. And Austin, you can go to the next slide, please. So what does this mean, right? These gaps, what does that really mean from a security perspective? We worked with a client recently who had a stale service account. By stale, meaning the account really wasn't even necessary, but they didn't know that it wasn't necessary. Number one, they weren't reviewing it because they weren't doing access reviews. Number two, even if they had been doing access reviews, the service account didn't have any real, taxonomy, to indicate what application it was going to be used for. And so as a result, it just stayed there. Well, it was given administrative privileges. That account was compromised, and it led to near 100% environment takeover from ransomware. Huge ordeal. Obviously caused, negative impact across the board. Business operations were stalled, all of that good stuff, right? The things of our nightmares that everyone on this call is trying to avoid, right? So, why this matters? Again, we want to stop these types of breaches. We want to make sure that the identities that have access to our systems are valid, right? And the reality is that all accounts are being targeted. So when you look at what accounts hackers are looking at, obviously they'll use any hole in the armor, right, to get in. From there, they're going to look at maybe a standard user, who doesn't have MFA enabled, right? They get in, they start looking at other identities. They find privileged accounts that haven't had a password change in a long time. They leverage, any number of resources out there, freely available to go ahead and get, dictionary, type attacks going on the internal side. All of a sudden, they've got carte blanche access to the environment through, again, as in this case, a stale service account. That sad part is, if it had just been disabled 6 years ago when it wasn't, necessary any longer, this attack wouldn't have happened, right? User account, review matters, and this is why. And Austin, you go to the next slide there. So, the other part that Garrett mentioned, was compliance, right? It's often said that, compliance and security are not the same thing. And I wholeheartedly agree, but this certainly is something that matters, right? For a lot of organizations out there, whether it's HIPAA, PCI, NIST 800-53 or other frameworks, right? We're being judged, right? So whether you're a SOC 2 shop, a SOC shop, an ISO shop, you're going to be judged. And we recently had a client, who was going through, a financial audit, and at the same time, an OCR audit. OCR is the Office of Civil Rights that heads up HIPAA regulation and oversight. This client had their inadequate account review process flagged during their financial audit. That then carried over to the HIPAA audit, so they got flagged twice. Not fun for anybody. What that meant is that the financial audit, which is done annually, basically the message got sent to the board of directors that the audit firm could not rely on the IT controls. Basically, a note to the board of directors saying IT isn't doing a good enough job within your organization, we have no confidence in their ability to manage the financial systems. So not a good sign from an IT perspective, right? Again, that message gets to the OCR. This organization, fairly small healthcare organization, but a small healthcare organization, community hospital that still has a number of identities. In this case, 15,000 identities across AD as well as its EHR and ERP systems, all of which were in scope for HIPAA regulation. IT was tasked with doing the access reviews. Well, gosh, they didn't really know who all those 15,000 identities were. So guess what? It was rubber stamped. And as soon as they started to peel back the onion, the auditors found that the access reviews were not adequate. They were not finding that people, did not have adequate segregation of duties. They didn't realize that some of those people were on leave and shouldn't have had access, should have been disabled. That certain people's roles within the organization didn't justify the type of access that they had. Again, this all resulted in kind of IT looking bad, right? That's not good for anybody. I'm an IT practitioner. I want my bosses, right, all the way up to the board of directors to think that I'm doing a good job, right? But additionally, it means fines for the healthcare organization. It means additional expenses now out of pocket for the organization. All of those things just aren't good. So go ahead, Austin. We can go to the next slide. So what does this mean to us as practitioners, whether from a compliance perspective or from an IT operations perspective? Well, it means we have to do something, right? We've got to solve this problem, right? This isn't new. It shouldn't be news to anybody on this call that, hey, you got to do some access reviews. You got to manage identities. And again, this is been around for a long time, right? But things are changing, right? So what we need to be doing, right, is we need to implement compensating controls. We need to look at best practice frameworks, look at NIST CSF and build out a robust security program. Look at what your identity and access management, governance should be. You need to be implementing things like MFA. You need to be looking at reducing complexity of authentication for your end users with single sign-on, ADFS or other, Octa, type platforms that can help kind of, bring in all of those SaaS platforms. And kind of bring identity under control. You need to be looking at privileged access management tools where feasible, right? But at the same time, you can't layer on these really cool technologies without doing the basics. And the basics are user and group audits, right? And that's where a tool, like UAttest can help. We've seen it help, for a lot of our clients. And personally, I think the product, covers, a lot of the basis that your typical audit is going to look for, right? So what needs to be reviewed? User account status. Is the user still here, right? If it's a contractor, that becomes a challenge. IT typically doesn't know if the contractor is still there. That's got to be pushed back out to the line of business user to make sure that user is still relevant, right? And if not, they need to be disabled. We need to look at group membership, including privileged accounts, right, or privileged groups, making sure that things like domain admins, right, are clean, and that everyone in that group has a need to know, right? And then we've got to look at things like password age and things of that nature, right? What's the kind of scope of the audit, right? Well, everything from standard users, contractors, and specifically service accounts and privileged accounts, right? Again, you've got to look at your identity, population, and as a hacker would. They're going to look at all of those accounts. They're going to look for any kind of chink in the armor, and they're going to leverage that chink in the armor to dig deeper. And that's really what we want to get across to you today. And then, of course, the folks at UAttest will talk to you about how their product really helps solve a lot of these problems, right? Getting identity under control, helping solve the IT challenge of saying, hey, not it. I'm not the one who's supposed to do this audit, but where it is my responsibility, I'll do it. And where it is my responsibility to pass that baton out to the line of business, I can do that easily. And I can show to the auditor what I've done throughout that life cycle. So again, it's been a pleasure chatting with you guys today about what we're seeing in the field. Certainly look forward to sharing with you what UAttest can do to kind of help make your life easier. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kyle.
Kyle, one sec. I don't usually do this, but I had a comment and just applaud one of the lines that Kyle brought out. Said the OCR cited the company for having IT doing the access reviews. That's the problem, guys, right? You got the foxes watching the hen house, and they're not putting down IT. But the problem is we haven't given them tools. We haven't given the compliance people simple, easy tools so they can make sure the access reviews are done right. Take it away, Austin.
No, I'm glad you brought that up. You beat me to it, but thank you so much, Kyle. That was fantastic. I'm sure there's a ton of questions for him, so keep in mind he's going to be sticking around to the very end, and you'll have a chance to ask him, anything around what he talked about and more. But with that being said, I'm going to pass on over to Sherazan. He's our product manager over here at UAttest, and he's going to be talking about one of our latest features.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Austin. And also thank you, Kyle, for the insights that you have provided into AD security governance. And let me just walk you through with our latest feature that we have developed that is within UAttest. So this feature, which is an AD audit feature, provides a clear picture of all the changes made to your Microsoft AD resources, which includes AD objects and also their attributes. So that is something that has been built. This screen that you see right now is the screen which depicts how UAttest extract AD information with the test PowerShell script. So the user have to download this script first, have to run that script on your AD, and this will create a CSV capturing all the AD server details, and then that can be uploaded onto the UAttest customer tenant. So once this is done, and the user hit next, then they go to the next screen. Can you go to next screen, please, Austin? Okay, so this screen just shows how the UAttest allow users to run the AD audit attestation campaigns on groups, individuals, and filter user through their managers. And whatever groups that you want to do the AD audit on, you can select those, and then you can filter data based on the groups, the individual users, or their manager. Also, you can have an option that you can review only the active users in the AD or the inactive users. So this selection will allow you to filter the records that you want to audit, and then you move to the next screen, which is the details screen. That is the screen AD audit groups and users. So unlike other AD auditing tools, UAttest makes it very simple to audit your AD groups and users. The AD audit tool can help you monitor group membership and access rights to different groups. And you can see with a snapshot who has access to what, and then can take action to any potential insider threats with this review. Next slide, please. Okay, the last is the advanced reporting feature that we have, which provides a meaningful and a filtered audit information to the AD audit, detailing the overview of the group and individual users of a campaign, the review date, reviewer assigned to the review as to who exactly has performed the review, user profile details, user group details, and users AD status, either that is active or inactive after the audit and before the audit as well. Apart from this, we have one mechanism that we are separating service groups, service accounts from other groups and other accounts. And also we have uplifted this by including one more functionality, which is the last login date as to when the user has logged in last on an AD. So this is how we are right now. The UAttest are capturing all the records. Like for instance, we are tracking the AD changes first, providing visibility of the AD directory, including the objects, which are users and groups, and then providing a detailed report detailing as to what exactly has happened in an audit and what exactly is going on your AD server.
Fantastic.
So yeah,
Thank you so much, Cher. Yeah, we really appreciate you going into detail about that. I'm going to essentially just unpack what Cher said, show it in a live demo, But first, one thing I wanted to cover is this is just what we're going to be looking at. This is how it's all set up. It's very simple. As Cher mentioned, you run a PowerShell script, you get the information from Active Directory in the form of a CSV, then you could upload it into UAttest, and from that point, certify, delegate, and revoke with accurate reports of what happened. I'm going to be starting at the step where we've already got the CSV, we've ran the script, and we're ready to go and start actually making these changes and assigning people to the access review. So let me jump out of this screen really quick and we'll start the demo. So here we are at the UAttest dashboard. And at this point, you can see data source, this is where we start. So when we're adding a new source, this is that screenshot Cher was showing you. We would choose a file right here, upload it, name it. I'm going to be using a data source that I already uploaded. It's this one right here for Active Directory in May. Now, what I want to do is I actually want to create a new access review. And say for this one, we want to see everyone who's a part of the admins group and make sure that the right person is reviewing them. So we're going to go over to our auto audits here. We're going to go all the way down to user audits, and I'm going to create new. From this point, I want to select Active Directory. Now I'm going to select the value. As mentioned, we're using the Active Directory May. So that's that export. We'll name this one. And we'll provide a due date. Next, we'll actually select where we want to perform this access review on. So we can perform one on all users, but let's be a little bit more granular. I'm going to go to select users. Right here, I'm going to go by group. And Kyle was mentioning privileged access. So I'm going to talk about, let's do the admins. Select our administrators right here. Cher mentioned you could focus on just active users or inactive users, but we're going to see all users because, as Kyle mentioned, sometimes we might have users who should be inactive, but they're still in the system. So from this point, I'm going to click next. But before I do so, I just want to highlight, you can have multiple groups here. You can also have individual users, sort by that, and you can sort by managers. So if you want to see a particular manager, who they manage, who they have, or what they have access to, that's how you'd run that. So there's a lot of different types of audits you can perform here. But I'll click done right here. It's loading in the background. So I'll just refresh the page. And there you have it. It's been created. So going into this, we can see we have 6 users that are a part of the admin group. From this point, you can see their information. Are they a service account? When have they last logged in? What their email address is, who their manager is, their job title, and so on. From this point, as Kyle was saying, this is not the IT's job to go through and rubber stamp this. This is where we actually could start performing these access reviews. And so we have these 6 people who have been assigned into the admins group. We want to make sure the right people are reviewing them. So there's a few different options. We could delegate this out to be reviewed one at a time just by entering in an email address or multiple email addresses. You could also assign this to an Active Directory group to view. And so you'd invite everyone from that group to sign off and certify is this access appropriate. Or a little quicker, we have the ability to auto delegate. And what auto delegate is going to do, it's automatically going to pull who their manager is and assign the manager to review that user. The manager is going to receive an email. They'll click it. They'll be able to follow it directly to the individuals and only the individuals they're responsible for. They won't be able to see anything else. And then they could go in from that point. They could review the group. Right here, you can see it's the administrators group. And they could certify that access. Or they could go in, review the group as well, and they can revoke this access. Now, of course, if the person invited knows all these individuals, they all look good. From this point, they could certify and apply. Right here, you can see audit user. That's who I'm logged in as. As you can see, it's recording who actually took this action. So saying the administrators group was certified by audit user. And if we jump on over to a completed report of this, as Cher was talking about earlier, you could see this is what it would look like. You would see when the campaign took place, how many people were reviewed, when they were reviewed, who reviewed them, and then going through, you could see the status that actually took place. So were they certified, who certified it, and what time. You're going to have these accurate reports. These are available in multiple forms, CSV, Excel, or PDF. So you could go through and make sure that you know who actually performed the action, what that action was, when it took place, and what that action actually meant. Hope you found the demo useful. We're going to pass it on over to Kyle really quick. So let's jump on back, and then we'll open it up to questions. But Kyle, you have the floor.
Great, thanks. Well, I think that was a great visual of kind of how the tool works. You know, I think what's always kind of surprising to me when I look at it is that it's not earth shattering, right? I think when you look at what a user access audit should be, it's pretty straightforward, right? Are the people who are in my system the right people? Have the right people reviewed their access, and how can I, you know, evidence that, right? So I think that what you just showed, Austin, is a great example of kind of the simplicity of the tool, but also how powerful it is, right? This allows organizations to really kind of tackle that big challenge. But you know, a lot of folks have problems with Active Directory access or just identity and access management in general. And Trace3, you know, is a full service consultancy, you know, where we tackle a lot of things from, you know, traditional on-prem data centers to cloud migrations and cloud adoption to managed services. I'm part of our security business unit that has a dedicated IAM, identity and access management practice, that can provide that kind of IAM thought leadership. So if you're out there saying, gosh, yeah, this tool looks great, and I think this is going to be part of my kind of overall IAM strategy, but I'm going to need governance, I'm going to need MFA, I'm going to need those PAM solutions. I want to try to bring single sign-on, into the organization and make that a reality. Our IAM team specializes in that, right? Helping you kind of take steps in the right direction to where you can really kind of, evolve to where you want to be. Similarly, a lot of folks, out there maybe on the call are looking to say, look, I need to be able to, comply with SOC 2. I don't know the best way to do that. My practice specifically on the GRC front helps tackle security program assessment. So we can tell you, hey, not only do you have maybe challenges with identity, but maybe there are other areas within your security program that need some support. They need some love as well, and we can highlight that. One of the big differentiators between Trace3 and other service providers in this space is that we're technologists at heart, right? And so we don't just tell you kind of what your problems are. We tell you what those solutions can be, right? And we try to right size those for your organization. We don't just kind of throw out Gartner Magic Quadrant, kind of solutions that maybe smaller shops can't adopt, right? And then lastly, and probably more specific to kind of how UATest can work, a lot of folks, like I said, their AD might be a mess, and our IAM and Windows or Microsoft Stack practice can really help optimize that, doing the cleanup, helping, kind of consult on best practices in terms of how to really manage, Active Directory overall, so that you can leverage a tool like UATest in the most efficient way possible.
Yeah, and let me just go on top of that. Once again, everything Kyle says, I go, yes. That's why UATest as a company is so happy to be partnering with Trace3. What he just said is he has an identity management practice, he has a GRC practice. We're a product, okay? And the way Kyle concluded with, if your directory a mess, 95% of companies' directories are a mess. Our product, the UATest product, works better when the identity and the information is collated in a orderly way so it can be attested to. That's what we're working. That's where Kyle and his group can help your organization a lot in cleaning up the directory and then providing the information in a manner that the UATest product can come in, and then we can get these audits and these compliance reports out quickly. All All right, Austin, let's do some questions.
Perfect. Sounds good. I see a couple questions already being answered in the chat. So thank you so much, Sharon, Kyle, for that. But I wanted to start out with this one. And so it seems pretty relevant. What effect will California's CCPA, CCPR have on audit and compliance? Kyle, do you mind taking this one?
Sure. I think all of these regulatory changes and privacy is just one kind of part of that landscape. I think all of this increases the focus on audit, right? Organizations want to know that you have a robust security program, that you have a privacy program. There's a lot of attention being placed on, who can access my data, right? And so obviously, I think we're going to start seeing increased audits. CCPA and CPRA are two examples of that, where a lot of organizations that we're talking to, want to know, what am I really required to do, and how can I evidence that? And I think access reviews certainly is part of that. But I think, in terms of privacy, I don't want to lose focus either, right? Privacy, I think, matters, but all of these privacy frameworks really require that you have a quote reasonable security program, whatever that is, right? So you need to look at these best practices, these industry frameworks like a NIST CSF, to be able to say, hey, like, do I meet those minimum requirements? You already see organizations like, as large as Salesforce being brought into litigation, by way of CCPA, but really it's because they had a security breach. So under CCPA, they're saying, hey, you need to have a reasonable security program. If you had a reasonable security program, that included, access permission, appropriate access rights, appropriate vulnerability management, those types of things, then you wouldn't have had that breach. Therefore, we're going to go attack you using CCPA, right? So that's kind of the legal foot in the door that's being used. And so we encourage all of our clients to kind of look at these best practice industry standards like a NIST CSF and say, peg yourself to that, because security matters. So yeah, privacy matters too, but people will probably give you their data if they think that you're going to use it wisely and you're going to secure it. So make sure you're securing it.
Fantastic. I'm going to jump on over to this other question we had. So can UAttest handle multiple ADs for audit? Cher, do you mind taking that one?
Yes, definitely. Yes, we can handle multiple ADs. Right now, the user have to just run this PowerShell script on their AD, and in the data source tab that Austin you just showed, they can have like multiple CSVs uploaded, and they can run that campaign on the CSV. So yes, to answer to your question, we can with multiple AD servers, right?
Excellent. And Cher, while I got you, I want to ask this other question that came in. So it's what information is outlined in your CSV file? And I'm assuming this is the CSV file from the PowerShell script.
Well, basically, we are capturing the user records, their group details. Like for instance, in users, we have their email address, their department, their managers, which groups that they belong to. If there are some nested groups, and we're getting those nested groups as well. So apart from that, we have last login and department details and all those details on the CSV that we're capturing for the attestation.
Thank you so much, Cher. And Kyle, since we have you, I'm gonna ask another question over here. And so this came in. How often and by who should service accounts be reviewed?
So we typically recommend that AD audits, are done, quarterly. We typically advise, clients who are looking at things like, SOC 2. If you're familiar with SOC 2, you know that, it's not a point in time audit, but rather there's a review period. And so it's really important that, security be kind of implemented appropriately and managed appropriately during that entire review period. And so we recommend that people do, again, service account reviews on a quarterly basis. if IT is the one who's kind of like looking at or managing the service accounts, well, they need to be part of that, right? That can be delegated to them. If there is a dedicated security team that has knowledge of what those service accounts do, we recommend that they be kind of the overseer of that process, right? To Garrett's earlier point, you don't necessarily want to have the fox watching the hen house. But it is important that you get kind of the right stakeholder to get involved with that and say, yes, this is still valid or not. And so if IT is managing those service accounts, you need to ask them, is this still valid? And so again, it's nice to kind of put them on the hook for that, but then have security kind of review that, that process and make sure that it was done effectively.
Excellent. We got a couple more questions here. So I'll take this one. I like this question. So it looks like someone noticed our Octa integration, and they're basically asking, what's your integration with Octa? And to answer that, it's very simple. We just we plug in very easily. It takes about 3 to 5 minutes just to set it up. And now we can pull information directly from Octa, which includes Active Directory as well. But that's the users, the applications, the groups, anything of that nature. We are able to perform access reviews just like the one you saw, where we're revoking, we're certifying, and we're delegating out. And we're actually able to make those changes inside of Octa in real time. So revoking will revoke that access. And last question I see coming in, and I feel like this is a great one to end on. What role can Trace3 play in a SOX audit? Kyle, do you mind taking it?
Yeah, as you look at SOX, right, you need to make sure that that you have adequate segregation of duties, that you have a lot of these controls in place, and that you're doing these access reviews, all of these things that we've talked about here. But there's a lot more to it, in terms of the audit process. Trace3 can be a partner that can do everything from gap analysis, right? We are not, a CPA firm. We don't necessarily, certify an organization against SOX, but we participate in the audit preparation typically for most of our clients, so that they have all the evidence collected. We can do everything from kind of just going through the controls and doing evidence collection and review. We can go through and kind of help operationalize audit preparation by doing GRC tool setup and kind of identifying and documenting the controls, kind of any and all of that. And then we can also participate during the audit as kind of a liaison and counselor in terms of how to answer questions and things of that nature. We can also do staff augmentation. So if you have to go through a SOX audit and you just don't have the right people in place to do that, Trace3 can help place someone there who has the right background to help support you.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. I think that's a wrap. Kyle and Austin and Cher, all good. Right. Info at UATest. And one bad here, Kyle, I didn't put your email address. So can you please inform the audience how they can get hold of you directly?
Yeah, absolutely. My email address is kind of a mouthful, and that's Kyle, K-Y-L-E, .Gililland, that's Gililland, at trace3.com. You can also just go to trace3.com and submit an information request, and they'll route that to the right folks. But again, the email address is Kyle, K-Y-L-E, .Gililland, Gililland, at trace3.com.
Perfect. And if you send an info at UTest, we'll make sure it gets some. But fantastic session today, and a bunch of questions from the audience, and I know we will get back to you guys individually as well. Appreciate it. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.